OpenAI is closing a funding deal that values the company at $850 billion. That's more than Coca-Cola, Netflix, and McDonald's combined. And here's the part that should make your brain short-circuit. OpenAI is still not profitable. So the obvious question is, what on earth are investors actually paying for? Let's figure this out together, because the answer to that question tells you something profound about where the entire AI economy is heading, and whether this is the most important technological moment in human history or the most expensive hype cycle we've ever seen. First, let's talk about money. Specifically, let's talk about how valuations actually work, because a lot of people hear the number 850 billion and assume that means OpenAI has that much cash sitting in a vault somewhere. It doesn't work like that. Think of a company valuation like a neighborhood home appraisal. Your house might be appraised at $500,000, but that number isn't sitting in your bank account. It's what someone believes your house is worth if you sold it today, based on what comparable houses sold for, how good the school district is, and what the neighborhood is expected to look like in 10 years. The appraisal is a bet on the future, not a measurement of the present. OpenAI's $850 billion valuation works the same way. It's what investors collectively believe OpenAI is worth if you could buy all of it today. And crucially, that number is being set by some very serious, very informed buyers. We're talking about Amazon, Nvidia, SoftBank, and Microsoft, which already has a massive stake. These aren't retail investors panic buying meme stocks at midnight. These are some of the most sophisticated technology investors on the planet, and they're all converging on the same bet. So what are they betting on exactly? Here's where it gets interesting. Traditional company valuation is built on something called earnings multiples. You take what a company actually makes in profit, and you multiply it by some number, usually 15 to 30 times, to get a valuation. Simple enough. Amazon trades at roughly 40 times earnings, Apple at around 30 times. OpenAI has no earnings to multiply. So how do you get to 850 billion? You throw out the old rule book and replace it with a new one built entirely on potential, and specifically on what economists are starting to call capability velocity. How fast is the company expanding what it can do? Because in AI, capability is the product. Capability is the moat. Capability is the revenue that hasn't been collected yet. Imagine if you could invest in electricity as a technology in 1890. Not a specific power company, the technology itself, and the one company most likely to define how the whole world uses it. That's the frame investors are operating in. They're not buying a business, they're buying a position in the infrastructure of the next economy. Now, for that bet to make sense, the company has to actually be building something extraordinary. And this is where OpenAI's recent product moves become the real valuation argument. Let's start with GPT 5.2. In a result that genuinely stunned parts of the physics community, this model derived novel formulas in theoretical physics, formulas that weren't fed to it, weren't in its training data in explicit form, but emerged from its reasoning process. That is not autocomplete. That is not a smarter search engine. That is a system that is doing something that looks, from the outside, very much like scientific intuition. Now, is it actually thinking? That's a philosophical question we don't need to settle here. But here's what matters for the valuation. If an AI system can accelerate scientific discovery, in physics today, in drug development tomorrow, in materials science next year, then you're not looking at a software company. You're looking at a general-purpose engine for human progress. And that is worth something that no traditional financial model was built to capture. Then there's Codex. OpenAI's coding AI just hit a benchmark that would have seemed like science fiction 18 months ago, running 15 times faster on custom silicon optimized for its architecture. 15 times. Think about what that means in practice. Every software developer using Codex just got effectively 15 extra hours of compute for every hour they're paying for. At scale, across millions of developers, that's a productivity multiplier that reshapes the economics of software entirely. And then there's Sora, OpenAI's video generation model, which is quietly expanding access to more and more users. Video is the most bandwidth-hungry, compute-intensive form of content humans produce. Cracking generative video at scale is like building the railroad after you've already built the locomotive. The infrastructure now enables an entirely new economy on top of it. Here's a pattern interrupt for you. The company most comparable to OpenAI right now might not be Google or Microsoft. It might be AWS, Amazon Web Services, in 2008. At that point, AWS was a weird side project that let other businesses rent computing power. Nobody knew it would eventually generate more profit than Amazon's entire retail operation. OpenAI's API business, the version of OpenAI that other companies build on top of, is structurally very similar. And the investors who missed AWS are not going to make the same mistake twice. But let's not just cheerlead here, because there's a genuinely important question buried in the geographic strategy that almost nobody is talking about. OpenAI is making a massive push into India. And not casually. They're doing it through a deal with Reliance and JioHotstar, which gives them access to a distribution network touching hundreds of millions of people across the subcontinent. India has over 500 million internet users. Its middle class is growing faster than anywhere else on Earth. Its developer ecosystem is enormous and underutilized by Western AI platforms. This isn't just a business expansion. It's a valuation multiplier baked directly into the math. Here's how that works. When investors calculate a company's potential total addressable market, the theoretical maximum revenue if they captured every possible customer. Geography is everything. OpenAI's current valuation assumes global dominance, not just American dominance. The India deal is evidence that they're executing on that assumption, not just talking about it. Every regional partnership like this one is proof of concept for the global platform thesis. And that thesis, if it holds, justifies numbers that look absurd today. Imagine if you could have invested in Google in 2004, knowing they were about to expand from English language search to becoming the default search engine for every language on Earth. That's the geometric expansion that the India strategy represents. One market doesn't add to the valuation. It multiplies it. Okay. Now let's stress test this whole thing because optimism without skepticism isn't analysis. It's a sales pitch. The risks are real, and some of them are genuinely scary. Start with security. OpenAI's competitor Google released Gemini, and researchers found that through carefully crafted prompt injection attacks, they could extract sensitive model behaviors more than 100,000 times before detection. 100,000 times. In the AI world, if you can manipulate a model at scale without being caught, you can basically clone its behavior. That means competitive moats built on model training can potentially be eroded through adversarial attacks rather than building your own model from scratch. Then there's OpenClaw, a discovered exploit targeting AI agent systems that can hijack autonomous AI tasks mid-execution. As OpenAI pushes further into agentic AI, systems that don't just answer questions but take actions in the real world, security vulnerabilities like this stop being embarrassing and start being catastrophic. Imagine an AI agent managing your company's cloud infrastructure suddenly doing something it wasn't told to do because someone knew how to push the right buttons. That's not a hypothetical anymore. It's a known attack surface. And then there's the talent war, which might be the most underappreciated risk of all. The most important researchers in AI, the people who actually invent the breakthroughs, are becoming increasingly difficult to retain with money alone. Why? Because almost all of them could start their own company tomorrow and raise $100 million before lunch. The opportunity cost of staying at OpenAI versus founding your own AI lab and capturing more equity upside is enormous. OpenAI has already seen notable departures, and when the people who built the thing leave, they don't just take their experience. They take their intuitions, their taste for what problems to work on next, and often their best collaborators. This is what economists call key person risk. And in a field where the most important asset is inside people's heads rather than in any database, that risk is existential in a way it never was for, say, Coca-Cola, which can lose its CFO and still make soda. So here's the big question, the one the internet keeps fighting about in comment sections and on finance Twitter. Is this 1999 all over again? Let me give you the honest answer, which is, it's complicated. And anyone who gives you a clean yes or no is probably trying to sell you something. In 1999, companies were getting billion-dollar valuations based on website traffic, vague promises about the internet changing everything, and business models held together with wishful thinking. Pets.com raised $300 million to ship dog food through the mail with overnight delivery. The underlying technology was real, the internet was real, but the individual companies were mostly wrong about how value would actually be captured. Here's what's different about the AI moment. The infrastructure layer is genuinely powerful and genuinely improving at a pace that surprises even its creators. GPT 5.2 deriving physics formulas isn't a press release trick. Codex running 15 times faster isn't a marketing slide. These are measurable capability jumps happening in real time. The technology is not vaporware. But, and this is a significant but, a genuinely transformative technology is not the same thing as a correctly valued company. The railroads were real. They transformed America. And most railroad investors in the 1870s lost everything because there was massive overbuilding, intense competition, and value that ultimately accrued to the passengers and the industries the railroads served, not the railroad companies themselves. The honest version of the OpenAI valuation question is, who actually captures the value when AI becomes the electricity of the digital economy? Is it OpenAI? Is it the chip makers like Nvidia who sell the shovels in the gold rush? Is it the enterprises that deploy AI most cleverly? Or does the value diffuse broadly, making AI cheap and abundant, the way the internet made information cheap and abundant, ultimately benefiting consumers more than any single company? Here's what the data suggests right now. The companies with durable valuations in AI will be the ones that own the customer relationship at the point where AI delivers undeniable value, whether that's scientific research, software development, healthcare, or education. OpenAI is aggressively trying to be that company across all of those verticals simultaneously. The India deal, the Codex ecosystem, Sora, the GPT 5.2 research capabilities, these are not random product bets. They're an attempt to plant a flag in every domain before a competitor can. Will it work? Honestly, I don't know. Nobody does. But here's what I can tell you with confidence. The investors backing this at $850 billion are not fools. They're making a calculated bet that OpenAI is the TCP/IP of the AI era, the foundational protocol that everything else gets built on top of. If they're right, $850 billion will look like a bargain in a decade. If they're wrong, it'll join the long and slightly tragic history of technologies that changed the world without making their earliest investors rich. What we're watching in real time is the market trying to price something that has never existed before. A general-purpose cognitive engine at civilizational scale. Traditional financial models weren't built for this. Our intuitions about what things should cost weren't built for this. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the honest answer is that we are collectively, as a society, negotiating with the future, trying to figure out what it's worth before we've actually lived it. The physics formulas GPT 5.2, derived, won't be the last ones. The Codex speed improvements won't stop at 15 times. The global expansion won't stop at India. And the vulnerabilities won't stop being found either. All of it is real. All of it matters. And the final verdict on whether 850 billion was genius or madness is going to be written by the next 10 years of history, not by any analyst on any network today. If this kind of thinking, the intersection of technology, economics, and the genuinely weird future we're building, lives rent-free in your head the way it does in mine, then you're in the right place. Drop your actual take in the comments, bubble or breakthrough. I read every single one, and the best arguments usually end up shaping future scripts. Hit the bell if you want to be in the room when the next piece of the picture comes together.